The following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in the Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
Whatever floats your quote. So this is like freestyle rapping for nerds.
Thematically and spiritually, yes.
Thematically and spiritually, yes. What?
Okay, sorry, that sounded like really like, shut up and listen to my point. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Second Rate Saints podcast. We are, an hour and a half delayed? This is how long it took us to get starting. I'm your producer, Caleb. To my left...
I'm Joel, and I'm just here. And to my left is...
Colton, and I guess I'm now the marketer or something like that.
We'll figure out.
You're the landowner.
Yeah.
Landlord.
Landlord? I'm
Yeah.
the landowner, sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. And to my left?
I'm Josh. I have a notebook in front of me and I'm taking notes
Sweet.
about what we say so that I can use it as blackmail later.
It's going to be recorded, buddy.
Yeah. I think I think of us four, you're probably the closest to actually being a landlord, though.
Maybe.
Considering you,
I don't know.
You were using your house.
True.
I mean,
But
He's the same as us.
this is not to say everyone else is homeless. Okay, bad start, I guess.
to the left of myself
We're back at me.
is Caleb.
Yeah. So we're missing Stuart again, unfortunately. But
Unfortunately.
I do have good news. Stuart is coming at some point.
I'm
in
always
the summer.
missing Stuart.
Stuart's gonna be great, man. We actually haven't released an episode with him as a founding member of the podcast,
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
and I'm very excited for
He's
it.
one of the few guys I have fun disagreeing with.
Okay, we have a couple of his essays are actually up on the blog. If
Yep.
you want to get a little introduced into Stuart, but I'm very much looking forward to his contribution. Josh, you read books. What have you read?
Yeah, I do read. Slowly, though.
Yeah.
That's why it took me 2 days to get through this book that's 90 pages long. Reading, like, a lot of hours. But, okay. So this book is called The Serpent and the Serpent Slayer. It is from a series called Short Studies in Biblical Theology. Short Studies in Biblical Theology it's a series of books that take a theme throughout the Bible and present the theology of that various topic.
Yeah.
So some of the other titles are The Son of God, Marriage, Work, Covenant.
I actually have two more that I'm going to read. I actually have them sitting in front of me. I got one of them today. City of God in the Goal of Creation, and From Creation to Cosmos, Creation to New Creation. And this series is done by Crossway, not to be confused with New Studies in Biblical Theology by IVP.
Yes.
Which I think, as far as I can tell, probably has a little bit more of an academic slant.
Yes.
What exactly, it's about Serpent and the Serpent Slayer.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's taking the Genesis 3 quote from the curse about the serpent biting the seed of the woman's heel, and the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head.
Right.
And it takes that theme of that comparison of the serpent and the serpent killer throughout the Bible. But not only that, it discusses the use and the theological implications of every reference to serpent or the like.
Right.
So there's a bunch of words, and it includes them all in the back of the books, which I like this about it. It records all the occurrences of the word throughout the Bible, so
Right.
how each book is influenced by that idea. But then it also lists all the words and its definitions.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So
Now, sorry.
oh, no worries. So for example, it lists the word snake is epheh in Hebrew. It also lists, depending on the use of the vav or the wa, depending on if it's the W or the V.
Yep.
It's Leviathan or Leviathan.
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 I'm going to start pronouncing it that way.
Leviathan.
That's good.
That's what a baby Jesus called. the serpent he would one day kill.
Oh man, that's
How will you sway the wire?
No, please, no.
And then you've also got Nahash, which is one of the more common ones, which is just general word snake. You've got a bunch: Pethen, Sepha, Sephoni, Rahab.
You also, not just going to make a distinction
Yeah.
here. You wrote your biblical theology work for your
Capstone
degree.
project.
Yeah, for your degree on Satan.
Yes.
Now that differs, although it has lots of ties to this book.
Yes.
And can you explain the differences there?
Yes, that's a good question. So what he's doing is he's taking the usage of serpents, dragons, sea monsters, Leviathan, as the example, across Scripture, but the enemy that we in the New Testament, like past the New Testament, as Christians know to be the serpent, Satan, is not only described as a serpent. He's most commonly described as such.
Right.
But he's also described as the enemy, the accuser, the blasphemer, all these things. The enemy, the devil.
Sure.
And so he's got a bunch of terms used for him, but the common expression for him is that snake in the garden.
Right.
The one that caused the problems in the original. So
But those two aren't tied together directly until Revelation, right?
Yeah, there's a theme, kind of like with the Messiah being God, God and man.
Messiah being God, sometimes a foreign king, maybe the Israelite king, maybe, but then it all kind of comes up together in Jesus.
Yes. And the same thing with Satan, where there's a bunch of there's really, in my paper, what I showed was there's two streams of information.
Okay.
There's this being called the enemy or the accuser, most commonly the accuser, who is this seemingly angelic being who opposes God's people, but in really strange ways. He's around God, and he speaks to God, but God rebukes him every time he talks.
Okay.
Right.
I don't want you to reveal too much about your paper, because at some point we're going to be going through your paper.
You're absolutely right. But anyway, so the
Yeah.
paper, the book here, what he does a really good job as is showing you, hey, the serpent described in Genesis, and he talks about how the serpent is portrayed in the story, but not just like, so for example, it's described as cunning, but the word used in Hebrew is actually very ambiguous. It's like wise, prudent, cunning, crafty. Like it's a wide range of ideas. But when you read the story and then look back at what he did, crafty's the only definition that could be used here.
Okay.
Or cunning. So like there's a bunch of descriptors that is used on him, or like the Leviathan is this big, strong, powerful creature in Job. But when you look back on the story after you've read the whole thing, you see that the descriptors are highlighting its negative, destructive nature.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's a opposition to life.
So does he
Yeah.
draw the line between Leviathan and Satan, like 1-to-1 kind of a thing?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Do you-
don't most theologies that actually take that as a unified, like they try to look at that topic throughout the Bible. They
Yeah.
always end up concluding Leviathan and Satan as a one-to-one.
Yeah. So because
I've heard that a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
yeah, and that's because later in the New Testament where you see the connection is you see the Greek word for the Leviathan would be drakon, dragon, which is
Right.
they're described as the same, being a lizard that breathes fire from the depths. And there's 2 verses in Revelations where it says that old serpent, the dragon, the red dragon,
Yeah.
Satan, the devil.
Yeah.
Where it's just basically John is just taking all these streams of information throughout the Bible, puts them together.
That New Studies in Biblical Theology that I lent to you, Colton, with
Yep.
the All Things New.
Still have to read it.
It's amazing at showing how John brings up, like, hey, this is how the dragon theme in this, and this is how it comes out.
Right,
This is this Near Eastern context, and how that's brought up through Greek.
Yeah.
Is that book similar in that there's a lot of...
It's very rudimentary.
Okay.
Because it's short studies, it's not new studies. So
Okay.
so it's only like 100 pages.
So it might be perfect for people that
Oh, yeah.
aren't biblical theologians.
If you want to get the concept down, like so that you know the concept, great. It's like here's a definition of a theology.
Okay.
It's not the full work of the theology, but it's like here's the definition.
Yeah.
But to your point about the Leviathan, what he points out here is that it's like the Leviathan, the word used, is in reference to Near Eastern monsters.
Okay, that's what I was going to bring
Yeah.
up. That's always been my interpretation of it.
But the author is using the reference of the Near Eastern monster and applying it to Satan.
Okay. Yeah. Just as opposition, general opposition.
No, like he's taking this like pictorial framework,
Yeah.
modifying it slightly, and applying Satan. He's saying that monster, that's Satan.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, then what is Satan doing in the courts of heaven then? Is there kind of a description of that as
Now
well?
we're getting into
Job
the
is
paper.
very confusing to me. Or not confusing to me. I love Job because it's kind of weird.
From my personal study outside of it, Satan being Satan's relationship with God is largely doesn't get into it because it's not important to us as far as the biblical text is. As far as God cares about our relationship with himself, like us with God, he's saying what God is saying is, with the lack of information, is that my relationship with Satan, he's evil. He's opposing you. He's opposing me.
Yeah.
How that works out in the spiritual realm is of no concern to you.
But it's nothing like that's been proposed by the medieval theologians, which are closer to dualism.
Yeah.
That's more. There's way more.
and-
There's no power.
And
over
that's
God.
how. That's why the reference to the Leviathan in Job is so important, because what God is saying in that like 2-chapter part, chapter 39 and chapter 40, is he's saying. He's questioning Job. He's like, "Who do you think you are?" Right? Because you're the Almighty. He's being sarcastic. You're the Almighty. You created the earth. You created everything in the depths. You created life, and you give the bird its food, and you give all these things. But then and then he talks about the Leviathan, this ancient monster that everybody knows.
Yeah.
And he says you wouldn't even dare fight it because it's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And he says, "But I made it.
Yeah. Well,
I've got it on a leash, so it can only do what I want it to do."
in that framework, what do you consider the behemoth to be? Just another.
It's a. I think in this,
Yeah.
people have made connections to the beast of the land. It's
That
the
makes
beast of
more
the sea
sense.
and the beast of the land, because
Yeah.
one is
Right.
on the land and the Leviathan is on the sea. But that's a fun reference. I think in terms of this, he's just saying, hey, see these giant animals that live on the earth.
Yeah.
Here's this other thing that's bigger.
Yeah.
It's a scale reference.
Yeah, I suppose. Yes.
Less theological. More like, hey, here's this. You're afraid of this giant land
More
monster.
allegory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, just to bring it back, and I hate to keep referencing it, but New Studies in Biblical Theology just last year, released Piercing the Leviathan, God's Defeat of Evil in the Book of Job, which is one that I've wanted to pick up.
Yeah, we talked about it.
And I just haven't yet, but I'm
Yeah.
very much
One
looking
day.
forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's he's taking, like he does with many pictures, like for example, the Ezekiel 28 passage where it talks about this being who was in the garden of God and blah blah blah, and he cast before kings of the earth and cast them out of heaven. That story, we as Christians look at that and go, "Oh, that's Satan." God is talking about Satan's destruction. He's yes, but not primarily. That's a story from the Tyre religion. The city of Tyre.
Yeah.
And God is referencing it to the king of Tyre. They don't have a king. They have princes. Their God is their king. So he's talking to the God, who's a demon, about you were in the garden of God and I cast you out. So he's taking this Tyre story and placing Satan on top of it, just like he takes the Leviathan and places Satan on
John
top
does
of it.
something very similar with the virgin and the dragon in the sky and all that kind of stuff. It's built
In
off of
Revelation,
Roman,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
built off of Roman myths around Jupiter. I
Apollo,
think.
Jupiter's son.
Okay.
But Apollo has a different name. Apollo's the Greek name.
Yeah.
It was Vulcan, right? Is that right?
Not Hephaestus.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
What have I been thinking of?
Either way, it's the same idea of using
Isn't
relevant.
Apollo just Apollo? Pretty sure it's the same. I could
I
be
think
wrong.
Apollo just stays Apollo in Roman.
Yeah.
I
Same
have no idea.
Do we have the internet to access?
Well,
I
'cause in the
suppose,
Iliad, Zeus is referred to as Jove, but Apollo is still Apollo. So they use them.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Phoebos.
Phoebus?
Yeah.
That can make sense.
I did not know that. Look
Yeah.
at that.
Apollo is also there. Also, Greek is Apollon, not Apollo, which is interesting.
Okay.
Makes sense.
It's all Greek to me.
That's what I'm seeing.
yeah,
Yeah, but
so-
it looks like the names are almost identical. It's just slight spelling and pronunciation
Okay.
differences.
Yeah,
But,
and to
but
conclude,
fair enough.
To conclude the
Yeah.
part about the book, the serpent and the serpent slayer, is he gets to the point where he talks about how characters throughout the Bible slay the serpent, but ultimately Christ is the one that crushes its head,
Right.
and him being bitten on the ankle is the cross,
Right.
but it in doing so crushes the serpent,
Right.
and so
Okay.
it
You saying
renders-
Christus Victor from our last podcast or 2 episodes ago?
no.
Uh-oh.
Okay. No.
That's your
That's what I am. No. So
Yeah.
we've kind of had a theme actually with the last several podcasts. We did justification, then we did sanctification. I guess we did atonement. Then we did justification, then
Justification,
atonement, then we did sanctification. And now we're going to talk about that final step in God's salvific plan for humanity, glorification, and
I thought it was annihilation.
the purge.
Oh no.
Yeah, we'll see how deep into eschatology we get now.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's Josh? When you hear glorification, what comes to your mind? My mind is like
Do you want quick answer?
whatever else you want to give me.
Okay, I was going to say that the individual at the end of his life, after he has died, is resurrected again into the new creation with his new body. The same way that Jesus was glorified after his resurrection, and his body was different.
Okay.
As some might say, because we're talking about things after death, so it's hard we couldn't fully describe it because there's a mystery to it, but it seems like there's you're not just returning to the Eden creation of the better person who does not sin, but you're also seemingly better. There seems to be different aspects to it.
Yeah. Well, and
Add-ons,
it's
new features.
both shrouded in mystery and impossible to comprehend from our state. Like Paul gets on the whole, like 1 Corinthians 2:9, no eye has seen nor ear has heard what, and no human mind has conceived the things that God has prepared for those who love him. And he's talking about that future state that we have with God, where we are with God and he is with us, building off that, like the Garden of Eden thing, but not more than just God coming down in the cool of the day. Revelation puts that idea that there's the city, the New Jerusalem, permanently on earth, which is, again, what does that mean? How is that better? No eye has seen, no ear has heard, nor mind has conceived what that's actually like.
That which nothing greater can be conceived.
Yeah.
So you're saying?
Oh no.
Yeah, we'll get into
Ontology.
Ontology. Let's do it. We'll do a podcast on that someday.
Caleb or Joel, do you want to define what glorification is in relation to sanctification and justification?
Sorry, can you... Glorification is as opposed to sanctification?
No, in relation to it. Like, what does it mean? You've been justified. You're being sanctified. What does it mean then to be glorified?
Well, it's the final step in the whole process.
I don't know if be glorified is the best way to put that. Right?
You don't want to use the word in its definition?
What do you mean?
Oh, never mind.
What?
I must have heard something else. Just continue.
Okay. Well, he's asking like how does it fit into that process?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Right?
What does it
How
mean?
does it fit within the salvific plan of God? As far as I can tell, and from my studies, it's that where we share that new life that comes with Christ in full capacity.
Okay.
Right now we have the kind of a little bit like the kingdom, the already and not yet. We still have that sinful nature within us, and we still have obviously mortal bodies.
Not to ask another question, but what does that mean? What does it mean to share in the whatever fullness of Christ? What does that mean?
Can I make an attempt?
What about
Yeah,
what about
I can.
changes?
Let me continue on with your first question, which I think is going to answer that.
Yeah.
When we share in the resurrected life, right? Like which we are already doing by the Spirit that is within us.
Sure.
And that's that whole thing with the sealed by the Holy Spirit, given the same Spirit that resurrected Christ from the dead now lives in you. Blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. Paul depicts in Romans that kind of like duality within himself. Like I can't, but I want to, but I do what I want to do. So the removal of the sinful nature will be there, which is the, as laid out at least by Jewish and Christian theology, is the source of all the world's. Let's just group it all together as all the world's ought nots. The things that caused our relationship with God to splinter and to veer off course. And so glorification not only is the final step of us joining Christ in that resurrected life post-death, it's also the ultimate, let's say, the final goal of Christ's victory from his cross resurrection. And that's why those two things have to go together. Does that answer your question at all?
I think so. The reason why I bring it up is because I think I'm slightly confused on what does it mean to, like, what changes between now and glorification? Like, are we the same? Do we have will?
Can I give my personal definition? Maybe it's not my personal definition.
When does it happen?
Your truth?
Yeah.
This is my truth. No. I was going to say the actualization and participation of our role in a new creation. That rhymed accidentally, not intentionally.
That's really good. I like it, though.
Could you say it again?
Right? The actualization and participation of our role in Christ's new creation.
It does rhyme.
It does rhyme.
Good.
Didn't try to,
Well,
but
You're a poet at heart.
Thank you.
Scripture actually is not super clear what that new life will be, because you have moments. Let's see here. What verse is that? In Revelation 7:19, you have, "For they shall hunger no more, neither will they thirst anymore." However, Christ's body could eat and drink, as we've seen when he was resurrected, and then he interacted with the disciples in that locked room.
Right.
I think both times he eats and drinks when he meets them. However, those accounts might be the same account, just in different gospels. But regardless, the sun shall not strike them. So work and toil isn't going to be the same as depicted by Ecclesiastes. There's going to be more of a harmonization there.
Well, you work because you want to.
Because you have to.
Yeah, but also as a
Not out of survival.
Which is an undoing of the now by your sweat and brow you'll have to, which is in the fall.
Right.
You also have things like they will neither be male nor female.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Where's that?
That's in the when
Romans, right?
No, Jesus says it to the Sadducees when they're like, who's going to be marrying who? And
I don't know if that's no male or female. I think.
Yeah, it says
up,
they will be like the angels, neither male nor female. I can look it up.
Does it actually say
Yeah,
that
it
right
says
out the
that.
gate?
Interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think, if I had to guess, I think it's because the idea of we're still rated G is because we will not be having sex because there will be no more reproduction. Is
the word.
If all the sex indicators are removed, we're the same.
Maybe. Here's the thing: humans are. I don't know. I'm not here making.
Yeah.
I'm not now making a argument that human reproduction will still continue. I don't.
But I think it's kind of like transcendent androgyny type deal. That thought kind of leads, in my mind, into like a weird Gnostic thing where you're going to shed all of your indicators of your own. Like, here's the thing: we're still going to be like it's a physical resurrection, right? Like that's the thing.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was
Here's the
bringing up,
verse. Here's the verse. Mark 12:25. When the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. And then you have other verses. There's neither male nor female and all that kind of stuff. Now, you could say that that's statement of worth because it's a culture that sees worth on male and female, slave and free. Absolutely fair. I would appeal to mystery because the scriptural text on this kind of leaves it for mystery anyway.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. Okay, I have thoughts on this, and so the whole idea of marriage to begin with is a unification or like an actual representation of Christ and his church, or you could even say the love between the Trinity itself, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd start getting more careful with Trinitarian language, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying, because you've also maybe you haven't read that book. Okay, anyways, it's a whole thing. With Timothy Keller's Reason for God, he goes over it in the end. That at some point, and in glorification and in resurrection, you become part of the love that is shared within the Trinity, which is a complete and whole love.
Yep.
That we only have a very small representation of within something like the relationship of marriage.
Yeah.
Okay, so when he says you will not be married or be given in marriage, my thought is not, because you have nothing else to offer or no reproduction. It's that you will already be whole, that you won't actually need somebody to try to know you as completely as the Lord does, because you will be known completely by the Lord and those around you.
You have the same thought reflected in Paul, 1 Corinthians 13:12, when it's, for now we see only through a reflection in a mirror. Relationships are currently broken. The sinful nature still corrupts both our relationship to one another and to God. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully as I am fully known.
Yeah.
And so there's that holistic thing that I think you're getting at that I think is probably... Here's the context, though, of Christ's thing, if my memory is right, and I should really have looked at this. He's debating Sadducees.
Yeah.
Which is specifically about reproduction.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing about your point is because of the lack of sin and the problems with human communication and relationships, because not only will the connection between God and men be fixed, but the connection between men and men, like man in itself.
Yep.
That any relationship,
Which is part of the fall.
Yeah. But any individual relationship would be more fulfilling than any marriage on earth.
Okay.
But here's the problem is...
As far as like connection and intimacy, because there's nothing getting in the way.
Yeah. The big issue I have with this, it's two things. One's a more...
Regardless of the sex thing.
Yeah. One is not as much of an issue. It's more of a pedantic thing. It's like, okay, how much of us is actually influenced by our sex, by the hormones in us? When we're remade into new bodies from our old bodies, how much of that's actually going to change? I think it's a little weird to say it just completely changes to complete androgyny. But
I think Scripture's vague.
I think Scripture's vague too. I'm thinking more just as a thought experiment.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, man being created as both male and female is a very big part of the symbolism of it, of the unification of man and woman, even before the fall, is being a representation of the relationship of God with himself.
Yeah. Well, there's also the aspect, too, of they will not be, given or taken in marriage. Yet, Adam and Eve were given and taken in marriage pre-fall.
Also, their union is talked about. They will be cleaved from their parents and become one flesh.
However, that's a person in the fall looking back at the, like, writing about the thing, not before. But to your point,
it's more the symbolic reason.
That gets to the point of the idea that what is after is greater than what was before.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Because it was all leading to Christ anyways.
No.
But the removing of, if just personal thought, if this is actually happening, if people are not being given into marriage, it doesn't mean that they become androgynous. It just means that the reproduction aspect of the human is gone. But they're still individually unique. And
male and female?
Yeah. Like as types of humans, yes.
I don't want to get bogged down here, guys.
I don't either. Yeah.
To me, it is like a big part of glorification, or at least the resurrection, the physical resurrection.
Yeah.
Because that's the question you get.
Well, I think the conquering of death is the bigger thing.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure, yeah.
But the fact that we've discussed this means that we're dealing with something that is
vague, has
mystery as a aspect of the...
You're right, but if the scriptural text only dedicates like 6 verses for it and a bunch of others for a different theme in glorification, we should probably follow the emphasis that the biblical text has.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay, sorry, that sounded like really like, shut up and listen to my point.
No. The only point I was making was,
right.
We've talked about it. Why did we talk about it? Because it doesn't. This is a mystery.
Well, yeah, I guess this is why I'd go to the no eye has seen nor ear has heard. Human mind has fully comprehended. Because there's so many things that are said about the future state of the glorified that we're just like, how the hell does that work?
Yeah, I think it's still worth trying to think it through to be like, oh, that's definitely not what it is, or this might be true, or just for fun, just to see what the Bible is trying to say.
Yeah, as long as conversation doesn't.
Yeah, unless we don't
derail
get
there.
bogged down in
Yeah.
it too far.
Yeah.
Okay. The other question, speaking of vagueness, is this idea of when does glorification exactly happen? Is it specifically at end times, or is it sometime before that? Like, is it after we die? Is it?
Well, when does the end times happen?
Now and here we are in eschatology.
I didn't want to go too far into it. It's more that can we go to, like, for example, say we go to heaven before end times happens.
Mm-hmm.
Are we glorified and in the presence of God, or do we become glorified when God renews our bodies?
I think regardless of whether you're pre, a, post, or millennial.
I'm pan-trib.
Yeah.
Anyway, it pans
let's not
out.
talk about
Hey,
that.
anyway it pans out, I'm all right with that.
Yeah. No, but I think regardless of how that goes, it's when the resurrection occurs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So then are we still being sanctified even in the presence of God?
So again, regardless,
Okay.
the glorification happens when the person is introduced into the new creation.
Okay.
That's like regardless of the situation.
Would you be able to separate into two different types of glorification? One of, like, more your soul, and then the final true glorification?
I think the aspect of the soul thing is the sanctification.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, isn't glorification also the end goal of spiritual sanctification? Not
Yeah.
end goal,
So
end point.
if the person is not resurrected yet,
Yeah.
then it's not glorification.
Well, they also aren't. Man, I
Yeah,
can't
So
believe
they're
I'm
still in
about
the
to say
process
this.
of sanctification in God's presence.
I don't know, but
Because I would just say that they're two different types of glorification, right?
I don't know if I'd tie glorification into the idea that you're in that waiting place, what Christ called paradise on the
Yeah.
cross, to the fellow criminal. Not
Yeah.
fellow. Whoa, to the criminal.
The
I guess
fellow-
he's a fellow criminal because Rome labeled him
They're
so.
legally, yeah.
But I wouldn't call that glorification.
Okay.
And then you wouldn't have two different labels. But that's just a
Because it's-
terminology thing.
it's clear throughout the text that it's upon resurrection.
Yeah.
The resurrected body,
Yeah.
when the person is whole, is glorified.
Yeah.
So also that gets into, because that's also a safety measure, because regardless of whether you believe in do you go to a waiting place, do you just go to Judgment Day?
Do you sleep until then?
Yeah. Is there a 1,000-year reign? Regardless,
Man, I can't
it's
wait
the
for
new creation.
I can't wait for our eschatology episode. It's going to be a gong show.
Like, it would have to flood, right? I'm so sorry.
That's beautiful.
Isn't it good? That was
I mean,
your rating?
metaphor-
No, it's too much water.
Thematically and spiritually, yes.
Thematically and spiritually,
Yeah.
yes.
So
What?
so all the conversations about the exile, the descriptions of it, is the words used are synonyms of the descriptions of the flood washing over the earth and destroying it.
It's weird.
And so, because God is
Okay.
decreating Israel in that same theme of the flood decreating
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
guess so.
You guys
So-
need to read All Things New.
Yeah.
It's such a good book.
Yeah, so I think, glorification is the end process. So whenever that has occurred, i.e., the person is resurrected from the dead in the new creation, that's when it's happened.
I don't want to call you out too much, Josh.
Yeah.
But you're a bad reformed.
Yeah? Why?
No, according to Wikipedia, it says
Wow.
no. Because this was something I'd heard. This idea that there's two kinds of glorification. Not that they're two
Okay.
different things, but they're like two-step kind of.
Yep.
Even still, that's not very good. But
Yep.
there's two event. The Wikipedia on glorification, as much as I'm going to appeal
Yep.
to this, it's not much of an authority, but it's the idea of that there are two events that occur during glorification. These are the quote-unquote receiving of perfection by the elect before entering into the kingdom of heaven, and then the receiving of the resurrection bodies by the elect.
Yeah.
So the receiving of perfection is in like your soul being fully sanctified into
Yep.
glorified state.
Yep.
And then the final glorification of your body.
Yeah.
Would you agree that these are two different
Yes,
things?
because because the reformers are amillennial. So it happens at the same time.
Sorry, you're gonna have to clarify that for me.
Oh, amillennial is the millennium is what we're going through right now, so it's not a 1,000-year reign.
Wait,
Sure, but when does your body?
Is Reformed actually? Like,
They ultimately
believe-
don't care.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which is nice, isn't
But
it?
do they
No, no,
believe
yeah.
right now is the millennial reign?
Yeah, the already but not yet.
Well, because Christ has been enthroned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He reigns currently right now
Oh.
with the rod and the scepter.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
I understand.
Yeah.
That
Oh, just automatic.
And so
Yeah.
so when the person dies
Yeah.
and judgment day occurs.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that there's a difference between that and Judgment Day. They're two different points in time.
Yeah.
So you
But
receive
when the person-
perfection
but-
before that.
Yeah, but the person is not alive.
The person
Yeah.
isn't a fully human being. I hate to say that, but
Yeah.
this is something that I believe.
They're not a person
Well,
yet.
think about
because
it.
Okay, but
God
that-
made humanity to be bound in flesh.
Yeah. And they're not perfect until they're judged.
Glorification is the means by which the elect are delivered from their sins before entering into the kingdom of heaven. How does that happen how are you not human at that point?
You're not fully human.
But this defines it as something different from that point when you're back into your body as a fully human. Like they're two different points in time. Do you not agree that they're two?
Sorry, say that again.
Glorification is the means. This is the receiving of perfection part of it.
Yeah.
Glorification is the means by which the elect are delivered from their sins before entering into the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a continuous flowing process whereby believers, Jesus Christ. Oh my gosh.
So are they
no, let's get
saying-
into the rapture. We're not going to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And then eventually you receive once Christ comes back, you receive your glorified perfect body.
again, because the revelation is describing Judgment Day as like an event, whether
Yeah.
the same way it's describing heaven as this giant gold cube. Sorry, the New Jerusalem is this giant gold cube that's 1,800 miles tall
With
Right.
jewel walls.
with jewel walls.
Sure.
The amillennialist tech, I believe I'm correct. I think is that Judgment Day doesn't actually mean all of creation is lining up in front of God and we're all waiting our turn.
No, I don't believe that. Yeah.
And so the idea of us being judged, like you, the individual walking in front of God, perfect, and then being judged and then entering heaven.
Sure.
The amillennialists would just say, you die and you're there.
Awesome. When does the new earth come then? Because it's a point after creation.
Yeah, so when you die,
Yeah.
and then you wake up there. So they
Really? That's what you believe?
That's a very common thing. It's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I disagree with that, but okay.
Sure, but I think the description of the events like Judgment Day and
Sure.
the creation of the world are they happen.
Yeah.
It's describing them in the theological sense.
I just think that there's a conflation between.
I understand.
Yeah,
And it might just be because I'm overly simplistic, but I just think there's a confusion between sanctification and glorification that's being made.
yeah.
I think that it's just talking about two different types of glorification. They're both called glorification.
Also, we're using Wikipedia.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Catholic section of this says something fairly similar, but
Yeah,
See,
not that
in
similar.
biblically, at least, in biblical terms, glorification is always tied with resurrection, almost
Yeah.
exclusively.
Yeah.
And I would.
But not
Is
always
that
the
on the
doctrine.
table though? Even like,
But not always the
glorification
Not-
has to be partaking in the new creation, right? Like, you can't be glorified and still on earth.
Well, a bit. Yes.
Actually, okay,
Well,
so-
kind of.
Whoa,
No,
Okay,
so-
a new earth. It'll have to be new. I get it.
So
yeah.
this gets to the point. If you're partaking in the whatever divine nature of
Orthodoxy.
the new creation, Jesus was participating in the new creation while on this sinful earth as the glorified Jesus.
'cause he was
Hold
the-
on. Say that again. Can you repeat that?
When he met the disciples
Yeah.
as his glorified self.
Yep.
You're talking to transfiguration.
No, after his
Or after
resurrection.
his death. Okay.
Oh, after his resurrection? Okay.
Yeah, he was
after his resurrection?
participating as Jesus as a part of the new creation.
Yes. Okay.
In the sinful earth.
I just needed to hear
Yeah.
you say after it, post resurrection.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry for not being clear with that.
It's all good.
Thank you. I don't want to lead the the people astray.
Especially me.
Yeah. That again, the timing of it after the person dies is largely that, again, to stress the mystery, the tension.
I agree.
Yeah, but that it's when you are resurrected, you are glorified.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop.
Yeah, what that transitory
Process occurs.
Well, hold on.
I
Regardless of Calvinist theology, or just Reformed theology.
Yeah.
If there's a transitory place, as many, I think, enough verses hint at, but you
Sure,
can argue
yeah.
otherwise. There's a transitory place in between where
Right.
souls rest between that. Christ uses on the cross that word that is normally tied to a waiting place, to that thief on the cross. I wouldn't tie that in with glorification. I don't know what that means, and I wouldn't tie it in with sanctification. Just because if you start to conflate those things, you start to ruin both glorification and sanctification. I'd have to look at it more to have a better answer for you.
Right.
But to simply tie that transitory place into either one of those things, you start to dilute both of those.
The only reason I bring it up is because that the Wikipedia wasn't the only thing I read on this. I read a few other things that said something fairly similar. I didn't read any books about it because I don't have any. But unless that new,
All Things New.
All Things New talks about maybe
Less.
less for sure. But a lot of these people I read talk about a somewhat of a distinction, not necessarily drawing them as two distinct things, but saying like, oh, there's this idea of like after you die being glorified so that you can enter fully into the presence of God and share in his glory. But then, there's also this fully glorified body that's given to us at the end of creation, that kind of thing. Whether or not they're two separate times, I don't know. Again, time is very confusing when it comes to biblical prophecy and all that. And
especially when you're dealing with apocalyptic literature.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. But so whether or not they're two different things, I don't know, or if they're just two sides of the same coin or something like that, I don't know. But I think enough people draw a distinction that it's worth bringing up.
So you're
Fair.
Let's see if I can. Let's see if I've understood what's going on.
Sure.
You're proposing, or maybe whatever. Your understanding
whatever.
is proposing that there would be two separate events of glorification. One would be primarily spiritual because it takes place before Christ has actually, or we've been made.
Before Judgment Day, so nobody's been resurrected physically.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, this all depends on, like you said, time even existing at all. And then a second one, which is just getting a glorified body,
Right.
which is another stage of glorification. I don't like double
I don't like saying
glorification.
I don't like saying it's stages or different things, but yes.
It can't be stages, and I don't think it can be two events either, right? Because it's,
maybe.
it's either you're glorified or you're not, right?
It
does feel like an on-off.
Unless they're two, unless it's used like how sanctification is Bible, where it talks about you have been sanctified and you're being sanctified.
But you
I don't
can't
know.
be new and then new again, and it means anything more than just
or
being
new like you have you're new and then you're newest. I don't know.
like the Old and the New Testament.
The new and the newest.
Yeah.
Testament.
I think
There's
it's
also a. This is not getting us anywhere. This is just
I'm hard
making it
against
more-
two separate events, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
As am I,
Well, no.
but I
And this
understand why the
this might
conflict
fix
is
the
there.
problem. It definitely won't. Is the idea that when a person is glorified and partakes in the divine nature, that this was a more like Jewish Christian thought, like the Messianic Jews, that when you partake in the divine nature, that when you join an eternal life with God, that one of the things you gain as an eternal being, like Jesus, would be that time doesn't work the same way.
Meh.
No, I disagree.
Yeah,
Well, I only disagree because I don't know how it would
Because
work. But
the
you know
word-
what? I don't know how a lot of
because
things
when
work.
it describes God
Oh,
being
it's
eternal, it also describes him as being present in every moment,
Yeah.
not just forward and back.
I'm hesitant in saying that in
Again-
sharing in the nature of God too
No,
much.
I never said that, but it did say that we would enter into eternal life
Well,
using the same descriptions as God being eternal.
as a good transition from this bogged down point a little bit,
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is a good point, is that part of glorification that's big that everyone seems to emphasize is the sharing of God's glory. Glorification is also sharing of God's glory to an extent.
Yes. Do we want to clarify that down?
Well, that's the
I
thing.
always, because it's partaking in Christ's sacrifice in some sense, we were now made able to properly glorify Christ or to glorify God.
That
Because
could be,
moral
that
influence
could be
theory,
it.
right?
Yeah, I'm a strong moral influence theory guy.
Well, that could
No.
exactly
Well,
be it.
as far as when you say sharing in God's glory, do you mean? I think this is what you mean.
Not the reaping the rewards of
Yeah,
it.
you mean we share in God's glory because we are a vessel by which God is glorified, and we give Him glory, truly, unaltered, because we are
Because we have been
made pure.
made pure.
Yeah.
Not just that, made able to be righteous.
Yeah.
Not just the unrighteousness has been removed.
Yeah, and
but
as
producer of.
we are able to share in God's glory because we can properly reflect God's glory as being made in His image.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying there, Colton?
Sorry, I missed what you said.
We can actually reflect the image of God.
Yeah.
Thus, we can worship Him. We can
Yeah.
glorify Him because we are now made pure. We have now been glorified. We are now made right fully. And that is how we share in God's glory, is by giving Him glory in the proper state that we are in.
As far as I've read, yes.
Okay. So it's not as though we're sharing as in we get a piece of the pie.
No.
We are a vessel by which God is glorified, and that is how we participate.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is right now, giving God glory is a very, very difficult thing to do. We can't really do it ourselves. In the sharing of it is that we have now been made able to properly worship God, like you're saying. And in right now, how do we give glory to God? By obeying Him, by worshiping Him. But
We're still really bad.
we're
at it.
still really bad.
Yeah.
When we are made
And that's the
full-
sanctification part.
Yeah. When we are made fully glorified, we are then able to properly worship God as we are supposed to. Therefore, we're working as if we want to use a clock analogy, we're working like a proper cog now.
Yeah.
And that's doing its job properly. We're doing our job.
Yeah, and that is how we share in the glory of God.
As far as I can tell,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay,
Or
cool.
to use old temple analogy,
It could be
the
that
temple
way
is
around.
pure, so God's pillar of cloud is now residing in it.
Well,
Yeah, you could say that, and you're right.
The temple is such a dense analogy that I don't know how to use that properly.
okay.
True. But Paul does.
It's a symbol of the
guess
whole
so.
cosmos, and I don't know what that means.
It's
yet.
a simple, where it's the outer.
I think the whole court is.
Yeah,
Well-
Yeah.
but yeah,
The other thing, because this idea of glorification being and sharing in it being this idea we're doing our part. There is also the whole symbolism stuff of being now made into an heir of God and stuff like that, and the whole idea of glory is also an allegory towards what a king would do. You give glory to a king, the splendor and glory of a king in his palace, that kind of thing. And we share in that. That might also be part of it.
yeah.
That
Those
we've
verses
been put
are
into it.
relatively tied together.
No, I think that just
not
both of those
explicitly.
themes are very big.
Yes.
They both reference the same thing.
You think they're referencing the same thing?
Well, they reference a very similar idea of
Okay.
glory and when we've been made heirs, we are the crown prince essentially
yeah.
of the crown, which
The
is
firstborn
Jesus
among
and
many
God.
sons, we joined in.
Yeah, and maybe
Co-heirs
there's that
with
idea
Christ.
that
Yeah.
you connect that with the glory of God's kingdom.
Maybe.
splendor.
I think
Does this tie
the
into Hebrews nation of priests thing?
absolutely,
That's something
but
completely. That's
I
different.
think that the reflecting the image of God properly, being actually purified so that we can participate in the glory of God in that worshiping aspect. I think that reflects the kingdom of priests more so.
Okay.
I think it's a separate theme. What Colton's referencing?
To tie it a little bit, so that's easier to
I think it's
understand.
running parallel, but I think it's slightly different.
Fair enough. I want to read a quote for this,
Okay.
so it's easier to understand. Glory is, I don't know who wrote this, I can't. It could be some rando, but
Is it the Gospel Coalition?
it is. So
I believe all the writers for that are
I was going to say
Deformed.
Theologians.
I thought it was a trustworthy site, but I don't know enough.
Gospel,
It is.
Gospel Coalition,
It's a
Coalition is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, glory is not a divine attribute like holiness, but the state in which God dwells and the way in which he's perceived by others. If that's the case, if it's more of a state and more of and not an attribute you have, it's more like how someone else would perceive you, would that glory that we share with God then be included in that? Not that we're being worshipped. That's not what I mean.
Again, I think it ties into that you are now a vessel of worship. That's where I would go. And maybe that's just because I have a limited view of things, and I want to tie it back into a Genesis terminology and perhaps even your Kingdom of Priests analogy, or tie there, Joel. But I think that's where that would go in with if we're going to be emphasizing the glory, if we're going to emphasize the benefits that come with Christ being co-heirs, and like the whole idea of judging angels and that stuff, which I don't know what that means, but I think that comes in with that idea of, hey, you are brought up by being the firstborn, by following the firstborn among many, and I think that might tie in like parallel. But if we're going to be talking about glory, I think I would always go back to the vessel of worship terminology.
Yeah.
But that might just be my limited view.
I found while researching this that this is a topic that isn't super well defined even in the Bible. Not in terms of like there's no structure or anything. It's just it gives the precepts, it gives some principles, and then says that's what it's going to be. We don't know what happens after that.
Yeah, well, it seems to be like a secondary theme in most texts. Like it's like, hey, here's the main thing I'm talking about. By the way, this is here too. Anyway, moving on.
Look forward to this.
Yeah.
So we should do a bit of summary work so that we're all on the same page.
That's a good
and
idea.
then,
Were you able to keep some notes?
no.
Okay. Fair enough.
But
Me
what I'm
neither.
getting at is, so we talked about how first we talked about how there's a lot of mystery in relationship to the glorification of an individual after death.
Sure.
We talked about we don't know what they're physically going to look like. We don't know when it occurs, but at least the cap at the end is entering new creation.
Yeah.
There might be some intuition into there's aspects of it in this waiting place.
Yeah, there might be a transitory place, maybe.
Yeah, but at least the scripture is solid on the glorification is finally at least occurring upon the person resurrecting in the new creation as the people of God, living with God in the city of God, blah, blah, blah. But, so that's where we're at. What else?
Now you're looking at me.
Yeah. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's interesting. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'm thinking about it now. We don't really understand the bodies we're in right now, right? Like a lot of human discovery over the last 200 years or whatever has been in biology, has been in anatomy and stuff like that. We barely understand our own bodies now. How would we understand a fully glorified body that includes another dimension we're not really even thinking about right now?
Yeah.
It's a whole thing, right? But you mentioned that this world's going to become our creation story, right?
Yes, this time period.
Earlier, before the recording.
Our superhero origin story.
Oh yeah,
Which is-
I'm not referencing something earlier in the podcast.
Which is something that I think Josh and I have had long conversations about almost maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, and you definitely initiated it.
Oh, well.
See? Question?
No. This is me passing credit.
Okay, cool.
Like you attribute it to me, I attribute it to him.
Yeah.
I'll say what I think, and then you can tell me whether or not.
Chain of causality.
And so, the Bible often talks about new and old creation, and those are totally valid terminology that it uses. But there is this aspect of because God made something good, and the plan, the whole plan from before the foundations of the earth, as laid out so many times throughout Scripture, is this redemptive story. The fall, Israel. Or the fall, Abraham, Israel, Jesus, the Christians. And the coming drama of whatever generations Revelation is in the new creation, and that whatever comes after that will be better for it. Yeah, so it's that they're not just new creation, old creation. They're bookends of creation to a greater reality.
Yeah, they're the beginning of time is Genesis 1, and the resurrection is the seventh day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, as Hebrews kind of puts in, is about to come.
Yeah.
And that's when we live in the commune, right?
No. No, that's us
Very-
entering the seventh day rest of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it actually means, not the common term.
Now, to be fair, I haven't heard that as a super popular thing. I haven't really read much on that.
Really?
Most new ideas.
I've heard
No,
a
no,
little
no. The
okay.
the bookends of creation thing.
Oh, okay.
And most new ideas in theology are wrong. And so there might be some implications in that idea
Right.
that are heretical. I just don't know them yet. So if you know them, tell me.
But isn't the biblical story who isn't a heretic?
Yeah, you can say that. I don't know what it means.
I'm not going to find
In
many.
N.T. Wright's Surprised by Hope, he does put forward the bookends of creation thing.
Does he? Okay, then
Yeah.
I just don't
Does he
remember
actually?
reading it.
Yeah. Oh, he does. Yeah. No, he's really good. I think that if you wanted like, I don't even know if it's a practical view on it. Surprised by Hope is really good, which I think is a
That's-
book from last week.
I
Yeah,
think
you
it's
recommended
the
that
most
last week.
practical eschatology book I've ever read.
Yeah, it's excellent. But
I don't know.
Well,
Left
he
Behind's pretty good too.
I don't know, the Bible's really helpful.
he actually takes down Left Behind pretty well. I like it a lot.
I remember you saying that, yeah.
Yeah, so his thing is God's rest not being laziness or this kind of comatose, euphoria. It's equilibrium. It's being able to basically fully actualize. It's a really cool idea that he has, that when Christ is saying, I will give you rest, he's not saying like, I'm going to put you to sleep. He's saying, I'm going to give you stability.
Well, it's
right?
this.
And that's
Okay.
going to be part of what new creation is a perfectly working system, right?
Well, it's the idea that we have a good thing going right now, but there's tons of ought nots. The idea is that reality itself is set askew, and there's a bunch of things in it that are, you could say, the earth's heading to hell in a handbasket, because everything, it's not operating as it ought to. Mm-hmm. And that if we went into some comatose paradise type state where everything's perfect and it's just, lay on a beach and get fried grapes.
There's also
pretty
another analogy there to 6 days we work, on the seventh we rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's a change in action.
Sure.
So it's not stopping, like you were saying, comatose.
Mm-hmm.
It's not stopping doing things.
Mm-hmm.
It's you do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be this whole existence we've been living in sin,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're changing direction towards God, redemption,
Yeah.
into that rest,
Mm-hmm.
the glorified life.
Yeah. Well, we bounced around a lot, and this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. What's up?
We got to quickly do like 5 minutes on, it's not just people that are being glorified.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Earth is groaning. Hell yeah.
Yeah, Romans 8, which is actually going to be my whole biblical theology. I wasn't going to get into this because glorification is normally tied to humanity and restoration and new creation.
This is the natural culmination of your idea of the bookends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The old will be stripped away and
The new will
The
come.
new will come.
Well, the idea is that some sort of purge, like the flood, as Peter uses.
the purge.
Well, yeah, it is. I think it's a good terminology for it, actually. I guess that'd be why I use it. Duh.
Yeah.
But Romans 8 goes into the idea the earth waits with eager longing for the adoption of sonship. And the idea is that both because of the creation story, when the vice regents, the images of God, go askew, all of reality goes askew. Eastern Orthodox theology actually emphasizes this more than Western, both Catholic and Protestant. And I don't know anything about Coptics because no one does.
Yeah.
I love those Ethiopians.
And so you have this idea that humanity is brought back into right relationship.
Yeah.
All of creation, the cosmos itself,
Yeah.
is brought back into alignment, is restored and brought back to something, not just like it was in the garden,
Yeah.
but better.
Well, yeah, and that's you see in Revelation, you see a couple pictures to that. So you've got the old earth burning away and a new earth is created. But and that's the same terminology for that Paul uses for humans.
Yep.
The old man dies and a new man is created.
Right.
But then also you've got on Judgment Day, it says like every tongues from every nation, blah 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 blah. But it also says all of creation.
Yes.
Not meaning all of the people and animals in creation.
The cosmos itself, the
All of
material
creation
universe.
Right.
is in front of the throne of God.
Yeah.
So it's like Genesis 1 where he's above the deep. And
Well,
it's everything is in front of him.
Well, there's
Is that
this.
where it says like it's the footstool at the throne kind of idea? Or is that a different?
That's
verse
both.
picture?
That's a theme throughout all of
Yeah.
Scripture,
Okay.
starting
Yeah.
in Psalms 2,
Yeah.
I think,
Something
where
like
it's
Describing the
it's
differences in his presence between earth and.
Heaven.
no, I think it's tied to Messiahism.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But anyway, regardless, there's also a tie. I think there's a tie here. Again, actually, I haven't read the paper yet, so
Yeah.
I don't really know. But this is where my past studies have led me, and this is where I think I'm going to start my studying into this, or at least continue to follow it up. Is there's a connection between God is with humanity in the garden,
Yeah.
which is good, but how much better is God with humanity in a city?
Mm-hmm.
And that new city is tied to kingdom theology, which is tied to cosmos stuff, with temple being manifestation of the cosmos. And I don't know how all those things tie together, and how many of them are solid,
And-
how many of them are analogous, but there's something going on there.
And man's. How do you put it? Man's joint effort.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Where cities are always shown to be, let's say, breeding grounds for evil
Yeah.
throughout all the
and
biblical
creations
texts.
of men.
Save for Jerusalem occasionally.
Yes.
Really only when God's presence is actually in the temple.
Which is like for what,
Yeah.
a day?
Yeah. Again, actually, when we go over your biblical, we'll have a series when we go over all of our capstone papers.
And I'll be finishing that soon.
Yeah. And when we do that, we'll go over, I guess, my capstone paper, which is the current title is the Material Universe and the Immaterial God, and we'll see how that goes. And we'll go over that more in depth when we're going through that series of each one of our capstone papers. But we flopped around a lot. I don't know how much ground we actually covered. We covered a lot of content, all related to glorification. Yeah, if you have any more questions or your own thoughts or criticisms, put it down. But we're going to transition into our next segment, which is...
What's our segment, Joel?
I don't
I
know.
can't introduce myself.
Whatever floats your quote, which
Yeah.
is kind of a fun joke about whatever floats your boat or goat or whatever the saying is.
Whatever
I can't
floats
remember.
your goat
Whatever
That's the one
goats
I
your boat.
grew up with. I don't know.
in the mother's milk.
Whatever-
Oh, wait,
whatever
that's
boats your
Leviticus.
boat.
It's a whole thing. Whatever floats your quote. This is where we take a quote from whatever origin it needs to be from.
But
And we try and take it apart and see exactly what they're saying
think it's
in
just
our
one-
own kind of skewed way. So this is like
Really-
freestyle rapping for nerds. So Colton, take us away.
Absolutely. I'm going to try not to freestyle here.
Bars.
All right. Today's quote, it's a great quote from a man whom I think we all love, Soren Kierkegaard.
I'm completely agnostic towards him.
What?
Really?
You
Yeah.
could not know.
Kierkegaard is...
I'm surprised you follow
Kierkegaard is
him on
great.
Instagram.
No, I just like the quote.
You follow him on Instagram.
Kierkegaard
He's
is
a
awesome.
1600s, what is it?
17.
1700?
Yeah.
No,
You're-
I don't know enough
You also
to form an
didn't-
opinion.
You also
So-
didn't follow him before I pressed the follow button. But
Thank you.
How dare you.
I follow the Instagram
I
page.
can see that.
Yeah.
But yes, this quote is a one that I think we've all seen and kind of like, or at least
Yeah.
Caleb talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Josh talked about it a little bit.
It is on my phone.
It is on your phone. That is true. People settle for a level of despair they can tolerate and call it happiness.
Shifting down into the fun zone.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Actually, I think this relates to our topic a lot.
You
Because,
think so?
Yeah, because one day we will no longer have to settle for
Okay.
a state of despair and call it happiness. We will actually live in happiness.
Here's the thing. With
Hey,
Kierkegaard,
that's pretty good.
with Kierkegaard, I want to know the context of that quote. Because with
Yeah.
Kierkegaard, he might be saying that's a good thing. Because that is Kierkegaardian.
But that also might be right after his divorce.
Yeah. Well, no, not divorced. Never got
Breakup.
married.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it was just a really bad breakup, but he treated it like a divorce.
Oh, man, it wrecked him.
No, he defeated it like half himself died.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, his thing, too, is the idea is you can't live without regret. Period. Just accept regret. You get to choose
Yeah.
your regret.
Yeah. No. That's actually great.
Got
That's one of his
straight
best
into
lines.
the-
Oh, dude.
Straight to
it
the
helps
dark
me
zone.
so much.
Yeah, you can't live life without regret, but you can choose them. Do you want to live the regret of failure or the regret of never having tried?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or-
that's the continuation of the quote. Is do you you have a dream about starting a band, right? And you're like, do you want to live with the regret of failing the attempt, or the never having tried and living with the regret of never realizing your dream until you die.
Do you want to start a podcast?
You're saying we chose the better of those two options?
Well, we haven't failed yet because we haven't given up.
We have the choice to regret our...
We're in the process of failing.
Hey,
I
listen to the podcast.
I'm just working on my testimony.
That's good.
But
That's a good
to be
one.
fair to the quote, like there's both good and bads in it.
Yeah.
The good is like, hey, no, you know, through your life, you land on a reasonable amount, something that you can tolerate, and then you learn to be happy at that level.
Okay.
Which is something that I think you could look at human history and just go, yeah, that's how they worked.
I think the Russians agree with him.
Oh yeah, it's super.
Life is suffering is one of their national quotes.
There's a reason why Kierkegaard is thought of as the father of existentialism.
Yeah.
And then Dostoevsky takes it up, and then kind of Nietzsche and all them.
Nietzsche?
Yeah.
But Tolstoy flirts with it, and Shulvanitskin is like all of that, but in actual history.
Yeah.
Not as much of a philosopher in that one.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this idea of, you know what, and actually, Kierkegaard's big thing is that grief, suffering, anguish, regret, all of that kind of stuff is not just like, yeah, it hinders you, but it's actually necessary. It's what gives you value. It's what, not gives you value, gives you the ability to value other things, knowing that there are connotations to everything.
I think I came to the same conclusion that Kierkegaard came to, but by myself.
Well, then you'd love Kierkegaard.
Yeah. No, but my thought was that there's a pain exists for a reason.
Yep.
And that in using pain for its purpose, it's actually a good thing. And it shows you what you value most. So when you lose a leg because a bear just took it off, you value your health. You value
builds
a good
character.
body. Yeah. When you lose a loved one, you realize how much you loved them.
Yep.
When you get
no pain, no gain.
no,
When you're working out.
that's not true at all. That when you are rejected, you value friendship. When you're lonely, you value people. And that like when you have all these painful experiences, there's that like when you're running, you're only thinking about stopping running.
Right.
Like it's
You value your rest.
yeah.
Now,
yeah.
there is a negative side to this. If we're just going to highlight both sides,
Yes.
the negative side is, and we can go with that other quote. I totally forget who said it, but there's the idea. It's about guys, but I think it applies to everybody. Most men live quiet lives of desperation, and this idea that you find a certain amount of like grief, suffering, anguish, whatever, that you can live with and operate with, but you're barely living. You're just subsisting.
Very happy, yes.
Yeah.
Great life.
Yeah.
And then you'd call that happiness. Well, it's the same idea why like there's, at least in modern Western countries, you have the largest amount, and you can say that as much as mental health is more reported, that's fair, kind of, and it is a true thing, but I don't know if
in other countries people die before they can.
Yeah, well, they have a lot of things distracting them.
Yeah.
But there's this idea of that there's functional depression is an epidemic. And I hate saying that, but it's where the stats go.
Well, it's just like some of the highest rates of suicide are in Ivy League schools.
Yep.
Like amongst ultra wealthy. Like but you've also I think the Bible describes something very similar to that, which is like we live in this world and we're lying to ourselves saying that this is good.
Yeah.
And God is screaming from the mountaintop, no, you guys are living in the closest thing to hell.
There's something better.
Yeah. Well, Ecclesiastes gets into that.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, happiness isn't found in these things. Contentment isn't found in these things.
You can barely even grasp these things that you say are so good.
Yeah.
It's vapor. It's nothing.
Yeah.
Meaningless.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's all found in God, and you find God fully in the glorified world.
Well, I was gonna say,
which starts with Jesus.
That's why a lot of the Bible, I feel, talks about glorification in terms of like some kind of hope, some kind of thing to look forward to.
Yeah.
But whether it's Revelation that talks about it, or it's any of the things like Thessalonians or Corinthians or Romans.
Well, it's all over the New Testament, and
Yeah.
I would argue in the Old as
Partially,
well.
yeah. Miraculous.
Well, even yeah, in the old it would be closer to Abraham's bosom, to Sheol kind of a thing.
Well, I think it would be tied to messianism. The idea that God will come and rule and everything will be fine. Because you don't have that external, national, existential threat with the messianic king that comes and rules all. And the idea is that would solve Israel's problems.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that that's tied in with it, but very loosely, obviously.
More general than...
Yeah, but I think that
thing.
that's where you can see... The New Testament definitely builds off of that theme.
Sure.
But I think that those themes are connected.
Yeah. But all this pain we talk about in the world, whether or not you have to just bear with the desperation of life or whatever, well, that's the point of the glorified new world.
Yeah.
We
It's
get
all
to
gonna
live
end.
in a world that is without this pain, without this death.
Jesus specifically talks, I think, right about this when he does the whole... come to me, all who are weak and heavy laden. Come to me, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for my burden is easy, and my
Yoke is light.
yoke is light.
Yoke
yeah.
is easy.
Burden is light.
You're
That's
right.
the one. Yeah, yeah. Which is in I think both Matthew and Mark.
I wouldn't be
If
surprised.
my memory is right.
I know.
Yeah, two of the synoptics, which actually gets into when I say synoptics, gets into our next series. So we're gonna get. We actually have some stuff planned out this time. Well, we did before. Obviously, they build off of one another. But
Planned things, yeah.
there's some planning that goes along. And so we did justification, moral atonement theories,
Moral influence theory. Is that what you said?
yeah, that's going to be a reoccurring thing.
We're gonna have a whole podcast just on how we appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm trying to like convince myself of moralistic influence theory just for the meme.
It's funny.
I'm gonna be honest. I wasn't there for the atonement theories, and so listening to moral influence, you've convinced me, is the best one.
It's so good as a discipleship.
You guys
thing.
should also listen to that. No, I'm just,
But we're gonna get
You should
into
listen to
we're gonna get into the Gospels. So we're gonna have the first episode is gonna be just about the Gospels, why these Gospels, what are the synoptics, all that kind of stuff.
and why they
Introductory in the
hold the
Gospels.
two most important gospels out of the actual Bible, right?
That's heretical.
Peter and
I'm gonna flip the table. The talking cross is
it's
the best
fair
part. And then each one of us is gonna take the lead on one of the four Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
So Josh, you're gonna get Mark. Joel's getting Matthew. Colton gets
Gettins Luke.
Gettins Luke, and I'm gonna have John. And then at the end, we'll do kind of like a harmony of the Gospels, which should be super fun. I'm very much looking forward to what you guys bring to the table. We'll be just emphasizing what makes that.
I believe we're each bringing a gospel to the table.
Yep.
Well, that's great news.
No, that's good news.
Yeah.
Jeepers.
Oh my gosh.
How you getting on?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we'll be looking at what makes that gospel unique.
Okay.
What unique theological ideas and themes does that gospel bring? What does
Yes.
it build on? All that kind of stuff. And each one of us can go a little bit of freedom into what we found interesting. Yeah. Does anybody have something further to add there?
I didn't know that this was Comedy Central.
It's super not.
I wish it were, but not quite.
Welcome to Second Rate Saints.
Second-rate comedy.
Second-rate comedy. It's all a gong show. And thank you for listening. And tune in next time to hear about the Gospels. Hopefully, maybe.